You're listening to The New Paris. I'm your host, Lindsey. As I mentioned earlier this season, I spent about 18 months working on a book with Eater, the American food culture and dining publication. That's a long time to stay mostly quiet about a project and juggle all the rest, the podcast and other work. But the payoff is sweet, and I'm so excited that as of last Tuesday, the Eater Guide to Paris is on bookshelves almost everywhere. It comes out in the UK this week. The Red Wheelbarrow bookstore in Paris, which is an English-language bookstore, across from the Luxembourg Gardens, kindly opened its doors to me for a launch event and public signing, and it began with a special conversation, moderated by Dorie Greenspan, the legendary New York Times bestselling and James Beard Award-winning cookbook author and baker who spends half her time in Paris. More people than I could have ever imagined showed up for the talk, and many of them well in advance to get seats. But that meant that space ended up quite limited, and not everyone could hear the conversation. It was also hot, and we needed to run a fan, and there were some starts and stops. Partially my fault, as I had a dry throat moment, for one. But I still wanted to record the chat for those who couldn't be there, especially you, my listeners. So I hope you enjoy this brief snippet from a moment that I won't soon forget. And thank you for ordering the book. I hope you'll find it helpful and interesting. For me, it was super fun to research, report, and write, and I hope that it shows.
Judging from all the hugs and kisses that Lindsey got outside, I'm guessing that many of you know a lot about her. It's 20 years that you're here in Paris?
Almost.
Yeah. Lindsey writes, I always think of you as writing about the future, like what's new, what's going to be. But I want to go back just a little bit. What brought you here?
Oh, I would love to say that it was an absolute obsession with France, but it was actually an obsession with the French language. So I studied French literature and linguistics throughout my education, and just felt like it transported me somewhere else. And the idea of potentially becoming bilingual in another language made me feel like I could take on a different identity, or I could imagine myself as someone else. And so when I finally got here, I realized what that could look like in a bigger sense, in building a life and building a career. The career itself was very unclear, but just the idea that there's a part of all of us, I think, that can get unlocked when we tap into something that's foreign or challenging or invigorating. And for me, that was language.
This is not what I expected.
My parents love to joke that I was a culinary xenophobe also growing up, and I really had to be forced to eat vegetables and eat things that constituted a proper diet. And my husband, who's here, remembers the early days of trying to get me to eat a variety of things when we first met. And so the journey from that to today is kind of even bewildering to me. But my parents still don't believe that I'm the same person that they
raised. But so it wasn't journalism that brought you here?
No, because I came when I was turning 21.
How did you get started once you got here?
Once I got here, I had a lot of different jobs. I struggled with where I could go. I was doing my master's and finished at a time when the economy crashed and there were no opportunities. And so I had to sort of cobble things together. I worked in startups. I started freelancing on the side because I had things I wanted to share beyond a blog that I had started when everyone was starting blogs.
Lost in Cheeseland, the best name for a blog.
But I'm not really lost anymore, so I had to revert to my own name. But I think what it did was teach me that there was something I wanted to say. I didn't really know what. And then it was actually a fellow journalist who gave me sort of the lead to my first opportunity. And so I will forever be grateful to her. Maybe some of you know her, Amy Thomas. She's written books as well. She used to be based in Paris. And she gave me the contact at T Magazine at the New York Times, an editor that she had worked with when she was based in Paris. And said, I told her I have this idea. I don't think it's right for my own blog or my own platform. I feel like I need to start telling stories elsewhere. And she said, well, look, I can't make any guarantees, but here's a name. pitch this person and see. And that sort of got me going. And so, that kindness that she extended, not that anyone can ever make guarantees, but just that she said, look, try. And, and then that led me somewhere.
I think we all need an Amy.
We all need an Amy.
I had a Margie.
You have Margie.
I had a Margie. I had someone who, when I wanted to do something and wasn't sure that I could do it. I always wanted to, but I was never sure that I could. She was the one who said, okay, I made an appointment for you. You're meeting so-and-so. She was great. And I always think about, now I'll think about Amy as well, that I think that it's part of what makes, of course, it's what makes a community, but it's what makes a food community. It makes a writing community. I think that generosity, that willingness to help the next person.
I think so.
I was writing for the New York Times, and I said, I want to write about Paris. And they said, get in line. And so you were really, very lucky.
But it also is, we're one of a dozen or more. I mean, it's, and it really depends on your idea. So there are no guarantees. It's not forever. And so I try to take it in that way, that like, who knows where media is going? Who knows where these opportunities will go? And so I try to seize them now, because I don't know how long they'll be around. And that's terrifying, but also the reality of, our landscape.
It keeps you going. It keeps you.
Sure.
I
clearly don't like things that are too linear or straightforward, or else I would have stayed. Right. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be working for myself. But there are moments when you kind of wish they could be a little simpler. My husband has that neater job. It's not stress-free, and it's not without its challenges, but certainly it's a counterpoint to the way I've constructed my life.
Come back tomorrow. We'll be talking about stress, work-life balance. But if you haven't gotten this yet, I'm in love with this book. Congratulations. No, truly. And
Thank you.
I feel like this is really, many, many people have and will and can write a guide to Paris and a guide to Paris restaurants. But I feel that this is just this is a Lindsey package. So it's got the restaurants, but it puts everything in context. There's so much history. There's so much culture. There's so much that makes you think, oh, did Nouvelle Cuisine really come from Japanese food? Is it true that all of you French people in here, let's fact check Lindsey, that street food is not eaten on the street, but it's so interesting. You expect restaurants, and I want to ask you about restaurants first.
Sure.
Okay, so it's not arrondissement by arrondissement. They're
Yes, we had to cluster arrondissements together because they were like, we can't have 20 different chapters. And for those who don't know, this book is part of a series that Eater has done that includes a guide to New York, one to LA, and Mexico City is the one coming out in the fall. So keep that on your radar. So it did have to follow a certain framework. And that's why there was a grouping of neighborhoods. In New York City, that's perhaps a little bit easier to do. But this was a bit tricky. So luckily, the first through fourth arrondissement have been grouped together as Paris Centre. That made it, right. And it's administratively that way, but it made it easier. And then the others were, needed to make sense.
And so within those clusters, there are restaurants, there are places to shop. But so I had lunch with Lindsey last week, and she said, where do you want to go? And I said, well, where do you want to go? And she said, well, and finally I admitted that, I can't even decide what color socks to put on in the morning. So Lindsey decided lunch was delicious. It's really hard because you didn't have unlimited space.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, I want to know, did you think, okay, I need I need restaurants for locals and for people who are visiting. I need high, I need low, I need simple. And how did you
You basically summed up what was a very stressful process. because it needed to speak to all kinds of readers and diners and budgets. And Eater, if those of you are familiar here with Eater as a platform, they really do a good job of that variety. So fine dining is important, but it's not the end all be all. And street food is extremely important, and contextualizing both of those. So yeah, it was tricky to make a selection that both felt balanced in each cluster of neighborhoods, and that there would be enough types of cuisines represented, and chefs who are younger, those who are more anchored, so it really needed, and also because, there's an element of, I don't want to say timeliness, but certainly guides are really tricky for this reason. There needed to be a dominance of restaurants with staying power, places that you're pretty sure are going to stick around. And some people might change, chefs might change, certain elements might change, but needing to have enough that would be sustainable.
Yeah, I looked at that and thought, that's a job for someone else. I will never volunteer. Actually, I did a guide once. They didn't ask me to do it a second time, and it was just too hard. And
it's stressful.
But what was hard about it, and I so admire what you did here as a writer, and we have writers here, I know we do, and someone who did a guide once. It's so hard to write short.
It's the worst.
Right? I mean, it's always easier. Was it Mark Twain who wrote like 3,000 words and said, I would have written less, but I didn't have time?
Right.
So it's right?
It was Winston Churchill?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Thank you.
Who knew?
Sorry, sir.
You knew.
Churchill. So it's short, and you're describing, in many cases, a bistro, a bistro, a bistro. So to find the way to differentiate and really well done.
No, it's definitely not an easy task. I texted a few people at one point, especially a friend who knows natural wine, and I said, I am going to pull my hair out. How else can I say this? And so he would say, oh, welcome to my life. So it really is a challenge to write concisely, but that's always been my challenge. So, but in some ways it keeps, I think I tried to focus on the fact that it would keep the information digestible for people,
so to speak.
And so I just tried to focus on that. But yeah, at some point
you did a great job.
But I have an editor, right? So that's good too. Having someone, the writer always needs an editor, and it's very good to have someone who will say, what if you say it this way? Because they haven't seen it 10 million times and can finally offer something that you may have missed. And so
good editor.
The best writers have editors.
So I want to talk about the essays, but I have a question. I have a bunch of questions actually, but okay. So you must get, because I'm sure all of us who spend time here get, that request from a friend that says, I'm coming to Paris. Where shall I eat? I don't want to eat where tourists eat.
Well, who's a tourist? I mean, the people who live here 6 months out of the year, the people who come for 1 week every year but know it as well as a local. I mean, ultimately, I think that tourists will go anywhere now, and we have such good information out there.
The information is so easily available.
It's so easily available. So can you fault a place for becoming a destination for foreigners who are really interested in eating what's exciting and unique or fresh? But this is a perpetual problem. This is a problem in New York. It's a problem in every city.
Of course.
But and establishments, and I know we have a chef or two in the audience who will probably say we need a balance of locals and travelers to make the business work. So I don't know. To answer your question, I
don't know. I thought you had a great answer for all of us.
But I will say I do get that question a lot, and some friends who want to push my buttons and challenge me at every turn, but now they can just get the book. Please.
That's what I'm going to tell them.
There you go.
Get Lindsey's book. So I want to talk about the essays that you have. Throughout the book, there are sections about dining, about a glossary of French food, but there are also, and I thought these were so interesting, these sections called spotlight. And so there's a spotlight on Southeast Asian food in Paris. There's a spotlight on sub-Saharan cuisine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, because it really brings the city alive in a different way.
Well, you can't talk about dining in Paris today without the discussion of colonialism and without discussions of the communities that shape this city. Sorry. I was saying that we can't talk about dining in Paris today without discussions of colonialism and the very specific history that has shaped the city's cuisines. So Southeast Asian cuisine, and the person I speak to in the book for this is Julien Pham, who is a food entrepreneur who has been involved in all sorts of restaurants and projects and pop-ups and cultural events, and is essentially first of all, his family has grown up has been integral in the food scene, and he made a very good point, which is that when you think about these cultures, whether it's Southeast Asians, the Chinese, the Sub-Saharan Africans, whoever finds Paris as their home, ends up trying to set down roots and survive. So when we think about the early periods of immigration from China and from Vietnam specifically, these are people who almost went into food as a means of survival. They didn't have access to the foods that they were familiar with and that they loved, so they get into food. But they also didn't want to rock the boat, so to speak, in their new homeland. And so you have this sort of proliferation of restaurants for generations that grouped cuisines under one umbrella. You would have Vietnamese food, Chinese food, and what else? Thai, Laotian food under one roof. And it wasn't because they wanted, the restaurant owners and the chefs wanted to be doing that. It was because, for lack of a better term, there was racism. There was this idea that Asian cuisine is a monolith and that we didn't need to differentiate. And there was the idea that these populations weren't going to risk their spot as in France by trying to affirm their culinary identities. So whether we're talking about Southeast Asian food or we're talking about North African food, that is part of an evolution. And today, what Julien was saying to me in the book was that you have second and third generation immigrants who are able to sort of affirm this identity a little bit more confidently, that don't feel like they need to tone down flavors. They don't need to group multiple cuisines that don't reflect their stories into one establishment. And so I think we're finally seeing a representation of these cuisines that is perhaps, as he said, closer to what they knew in their own countries. So I think it's exciting. I think the reason we need to spotlight this is because this is a city that is full of these cuisines and is kind of crucial if we're going to talk about what it means to be dining and eating and cooking in Paris today. It is all of these cultures that have shaped the very identity of Paris. That was a very long-winded way of saying it, and I apologize for the throat situation.
It's those conversations, the conversations that are kind of dotted throughout this book, that make it so much more than a restaurant guide. I think that when you see the Eater Guide to Paris, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to find the best restaurant for me. But you're going to find, you did so much more. Did the work change as you were working on it?
Yeah, the problem with writing a book like this is that things change. The thing that happens during a project like this is that it's long. So things change about 8 months in, 9 months in, a year in. And then when you're editing the manuscript, You get some bombshell news that a chef has decided to abruptly leave an establishment, and it throws everything up in the air about something you were writing. And so luckily we had these incremental, well, the first pass, the second pass of this manuscript that allows us to make
Third pass.
Third pass.
I had a third pass.
You do. You have 3 passes, except by the end they say, really don't make too many changes. Please don't change anything. And yet you learn that, someone passed away or something completely shut down because of unforeseen circumstances. And so if you have that opportunity to just take it out, you do, but it does feel a little bit painful, like you lose a bit of the story because you have it mapped out in your head so specifically. But this is the nature of the beast.
Well, and of a guidebook.
And of a guide. But I really appreciate what you said, which is that it's more than a guide. And I hope people see it that way. All of my work has been an attempt to say, you can use it that way. Just like I'm amazed that people carried the new Paris with them to this city in their suitcases when that thing weighs a ton. And you can use it in that way, but really it's to understand this city in this moment and as an evolving destination.
So I have 2 quick questions, and then will you take questions?
If anyone wants to scream, you're more than welcome to ask questions.
Was there something that surprised you? Was there a nugget that came out of this project?
I think
something you didn't expect.
I think what surprised me is just how far we've come as a city. From the time that I did the New Paris, when the amount of street food or the amount of diaspora cuisine was just not where it is today. And so I think there's an excitement and an energy and a confidence in a lot of chefs that I'm seeing today that makes this, to me, the best city to dine out in. There's still an incredible value. There's still a lot of creativity. And there's still those anchors, the French bistro, which has gotten reinvigorated by, new ownership and newer chefs or just a new energy to try to infuse into something that's old and beloved. And so I think that was the surprising thing, was just there was so much to choose from. And that's overwhelming. And I also think that maybe it's not sustainable, that there are openings all the time and that there are new projects all the time. But it does say that this city is moving in a way that it wasn't before.
So I refrained from asking you about pastry because everybody's, but there is an evolution of pastry. Really well done in here. Did you come across anything, be honest, anything that you love so much you didn't want to put it in the book? Will you tell us?
Basically every single coffee shop I love that does good work. Pastry, look, there are going to be lines at the best pastry shops for reasons of their own talent, not because, they've been put in guidebooks or in magazines. But of course, there's always that feeling of, I want to help them, this is going to help them, but also I want to keep something to myself. But at this point, I've probably ruined places for the general public
or brought to light.
Sure. But it just means that, if I can't even go myself as a regular anymore, then, but whatever, this is a hazard of the job.
That's the criterion. Questions? Anybody got a question?
I had a question about the illustrations.
Oh, yes.
If you look at the book, the illustrations are absolutely gorgeous. So how did you work with the illustrator? Or did you?
So this was not me. However, I did get to sort of put my stamp on a few illustrators whose work in the short list I thought were really special. And, I really, really loved her style. And so they went with her. So the nature of this book was sort of, I didn't have full control over the graphic elements. All of the books in the series are illustrated. But I have to...
All different
illustrators, but, and they pick a local illustrator, but I really think we kind of have the best one. And she makes it really fun and playful, and helpful.
Well, they're really nice. Wait, would you hold and I'll repeat what you said, and then you can go on, hope I get it right. That Lindsey talked a lot about the early immigration and about how the culture evolved. Yes?
How they couldn't really
How they couldn't
express themselves in the beginning with their local
how they
identity.
couldn't express themselves in the beginning with their true identities. Continue.
So that's
You can do
evolved.
this.
Are you willing to say, would you naturally say, that those cuisines that they now have are much more authentic?
I mean, the word authentic is such a loaded.
The question is, are the
no, sorry.
cuisines now, would Lindsey be willing to say, are the cuisines now more authentic?
So the word authentic is often, divisive because, well, what does that mean, and to whom, and who decides? The person who said to me that, at least in the case of Southeast Asian food, that it is resembling more what people would find in their home country, was Julien Femme. And so I felt like it isn't for me to say, but certainly he said it with great confidence, and that it was a real marked change from 5-10 years ago. So I mean, I would just say that if a diner who has traveled the world and feels that a certain cuisine is not actually dialing things down or trying to cater to a local palate in a way that completely alters the original cuisine, then I think we're probably in a good place. But, who's to say that, the French really struggle with a lot of spice. So in the reverse.
Thinking about the person going to eat, I was thinking about the person preparing the food.
Right. I mean, I would hope that that's how they feel, that they're able to, they don't have to inhibit themselves anymore.
I have a question about process.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of restaurants. How do you start to hone it down? I mean, you can't eat everywhere.
No.
Can you?
No. I mean, I ate at a lot of places. The process was, what do I think makes this city, who and where makes this city stellar? Who is new to the city that is doing something that's probably going to be long lasting? Where do I keep going back? Where do people I trust go that I maybe haven't spent a lot of time? So really pulling from every facet of my mind and my connections to feel like I was putting together a list that made sense.
So you're honing it down.
Oh, absolutely. But when you have the framework of a cluster of neighborhoods, that really helps as well, because you can only have 18 to 25 restaurants, let's say, per section, and so that will tell you pretty quickly, what really feels like it makes the cut.
Did you have a new place that you discovered that you added, that you, like during this process, that you discovered that stood out to you?
So Charlie, I know this person. She asked if there were new places that I added as I was writing. Yeah, there were definitely a few newer establishments. Oh gosh, now you're putting me on the spot and I have to think, what did I include that was really new? Well, Kubri, the chef of Kubri, is sitting right here. She wasn't right here, right in front of us. Woo! But at this point, she was already open long enough for me to, incorporate her in the first round of the manuscript. But at the same time, it was still relatively new. Other places, there were a few places that opened sort of just after I couldn't make any more changes, and so they're not in there, unfortunately. But look, this is the nature of it, and then you just need to keep following me because I'm going to talk about all of these. But no, this is the kind of give and take of these sorts of projects.
Volume 2.
Oh, if I have, in my next life, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up what Mary was saying about process and what you said earlier about Amy.
Yeah.
There might have been like some people, some Amy's that sort of helped with the process.
In this particular book, oh, absolutely. I mean,
People who pointed you to things, and you trusted them for all the reasons that you come to trust them.
well, there are several French journalists who I really trust as well. So I'm constantly looking to my French colleagues to see what they see as crucial. What places do they find represent the Paris of today? So there are a handful of people that I look to, and then other Anglo journalists who have covered food, but I try to, if I ask too many people, then it gets very cloudy. So really try to listen to my gut and then refer to a few people when I needed a sounding board. Yes.
So I'm the person that my friends from New York always ask, I'm going to be in Paris for 4 days, where do I eat? I'd love to recommend the bouillons, but the food's quite mediocre.
Right.
But
So
I love the experience and the history. So
it's funny. She said that she's the person who her friends in New York ask, where do I go in Paris? Because you come to Paris.
I'm there for 4 days.
Right. And she loves to recommend bouillon. Are all of you familiar with a bouillon, which is, an old worker's sort of canteen, and the food is very inexpensive. And that means you're not getting your best cut of beef. You're not getting the highest quality food, but there is something very nourishing about it. I think Bouillon Pigalle is fun. I think Chartier is, well, first of all, Chartier is not in the book for obvious reasons. I think it is absolutely inedible. So Bouillon Pigalle, for me, at least, if you're going to have that experience and, order like a Jeroboam of diet soda, or of wine, it's a format that you just don't see very much anymore. And so it is fun. Would I go there when I'm looking for the best, quality steak? No, but it serves a purpose. And actually, when I wrote about Bouillon Pigalle for the Times when it opened, and it occurred to me when I was there that it was sort of like the way we appreciate an American diner. The diner is not meant to be a transformative experience. It is not the best quality food, but it serves a purpose, and that can be quite fulfilling and nourishing at the same time. And so I think the bouillon is sort of the diner equivalent in my mind. How are you all doing? Because I'm sure you're roasting. Yeah. Why don't we go outside? Everyone can get a drink and we can talk. Merci. Merci. Dorie, thank you.
That's the show for today. If you're listening on Spotify, be sure to check out the poll related to this episode by scrolling down in your app. There are more exciting conversations to come this season, so I hope you'll subscribe or share the show with a friend if you've been enjoying what you've heard so far. As always, you can find more from me at lindseytramuta.com and at the New Paris Dispatch on Substack. À très bientôt.